So to get started today, I'd like to ask you to raise your hands if you're a part of the club. Now, for those without their hands up, you're probably wondering what club I'm talking about. But I can assure you you're familiar with this club, because the club I'm referring to is something I like to call Murder Mystery Club. So this is the club for people that are absolutely obsessed with true crime and love to watch it either in documentary or listen to it in podcast or television form. And what I found is that most people are either part of the club or likely in a relationship with somebody who's part of the club. And in my case, I happen to be both. You see, my obsession with true crime started with a show called Unsolved Mysteries, hosted by Robert Stack. And in the intro to the show, he had this great line: perhaps you can help solve a mystery. And try as I might, watching that show for years, I was never able to solve one of the ones on the show. But I'm hoping that I might be able to solve a mystery tonight. Because although I spend my late nights watching and absorbing true crime, I spend most of my time in the last 30 years working in the hospitality industry. So the mystery that I'd like to help solve today is, what ever happened to Calvin? And the answer might just surprise you. For those that are unaware, Calvin was the main character in a series of McDonald's commercials back in the 90s. And when the series began, all of Calvin's neighbors were concerned because they hadn't seen him around in a while. But not to worry. You see, Calvin had found a job at McDonald's. Long before Burger King convinced Mary J. Blige to sing to us about chicken tenders, McDonald's tried to position itself as a proud pillar of the Black community. And in the course of his commercials, Calvin went from hanging on the corner to working his way up to afternoon manager, gaining the admiration of his friends and family, and dreaming of one day owning a McDonald's franchise of his own. And although he was a bright kid, I'm not convinced that Calvin's story would have gone quite the same today. You see, back then, Calvin likely could walk into his local fast food restaurant, fill out an application, go through an interview, and maybe even get hired that day. But today, Calvin's likely going to be greeted by a sign telling him to apply for a job online or scan a QR code to start his application. And this continues to happen despite the remarkably low number of people who actually finish online applications. A 2022 study by the Society for Human Resources Management found that more than 90% of people who start online applications never actually finish them. And I don't blame them. I mean, think about the last time that you applied for a job online. It probably went something like this. You went on the website, you filled in all your basic information, you clicked the button to submit your resume, and then you spent the next 20 to 30 minutes typing in all the information that was already on your resume for one job. And then you did that over and over and over again for every job you were applying for, possibly being eliminated from consideration by an applicant tracking system because your resume didn't have the right combination of keywords. You see, technology should be making applying for jobs and getting hired easier, but in a lot of cases, it's becoming a barrier to entry. And in an industry like the hospitality industry, which has 450,000 more open positions than 3 years ago, is failing to meet its target workforce where they are. See, we don't know everything about Calvin, but we do know that he's Black. And that means there's about a 1 in 5 chance that he did not have high-speed internet access in the home. We can also put together that since he was often seen walking back and forth to his fast food job and his neighbors were worried about him hanging on the corner, that he probably was one of the more than 40 million Americans living beneath the poverty line. And that's a double strike against him, because 50% of the poorest households in this country don't have access to internet in the home. We were supposed to learn a lot of lessons in the pandemic, and one of them was about the digital divide. That's unfortunately leaving so many of our most vulnerable children behind. And while I'm aware that most of us walk around with computers in our pockets that we sometimes occasionally use to make phone calls. We have to remember that access does not necessarily equal literacy or proficiency. I'm sure you can think of a few times where someone has walked up to you with a smartphone in hand asking for directions. But the problems that someone like Calvin faced don't stop simply at when the application is put in. They continue throughout their careers. And I've seen them firsthand as I've traveled the US hiring thousands of people. I can recall a time in the South where someone was unable to finish their application because they had forgotten their password to their email. So they spent 20 minutes sending the link to reset their password to the very email that they couldn't get into. Or in the Northeast, where I saw someone unable to sign up for direct deposit or benefits because the company's website wasn't optimized for mobile devices. Or in the Midwest, watching a single parent struggle to just be able to get her pay stubs so she could get an apartment that she desperately needed. And these challenges continue throughout their careers. Most of the times, great organizations will reward their best and hardest working, most dedicated employees with opportunities for advancement. And while a lot of emerging leaders struggle with the development of soft skills, what we're seeing is an increasing gap in the amount of hard skills as well. These are things that all of us take for granted. I'm seeing managers not able to send emails, log into online meetings, or learning management systems to take required coursework. Put simply, our mid-level managers are entering leadership roles with entry-level computer skills. You know, a great friend of mine once told me that if I wanted to recognize my full potential, the first step I was going to have to take was accepting that I'm exceptional. It's solid advice, but in order to stay grounded, I also needed to recognize where I might be the exception. You see, my childhood was very similar to Calvin's. I grew up not too far from here in the inner city, and though my siblings and I had a wonderful array of blessings, we didn't have a computer or internet in the home. And I think about the number of children that unfortunately are not going to have those opportunities because they were born a generation or two later and not able to go simply fill out a paper application for a job opportunity. The American dream tells us that we all have the same opportunities to achieve anything that we want to achieve. But opportunity cannot possibly be equal if the playing field is not level. And kids who grow up in homes without computers are less likely to use them even when they're available in public spaces like libraries and school. And generational poverty is extremely difficult to escape. But there's hope. With the advancement of artificial intelligence, there are now systems that allow people to apply for jobs and be scheduled for interviews all through text message. I decided to try one of them recently, and I applied for a cook at my local fast food restaurant, which had 15 openings. And in less than 15 minutes, all via text message, I was told that I met the qualifications and I'd be scheduled for an interview. But when the chatbot attempted to connect to the hiring manager's calendar, it experienced an error and let me know that I'd be notified by phone within 3 business days of when I could come in for an interview. And so I waited. And on the 4th business day, I went back to the company's website and I submitted another application. And I got the same error. So I waited. And on the 8th business day, I went on the company's website and I submitted another application. That was 10 months ago. And I've still never gotten a phone call to come in for an interview. And someone who's desperate to start working is not going to wait that long. But I know it's easier to say that nobody wants to work these days, right? You know, this is the problem that we need to address in America. Because even if you believe that there's a concerted effort to make sure there is a permanent underclass, there's a problem with that strategy. because as much as capitalism feeds off profit, it also feeds off growth. And companies cannot grow if they don't have the people that are able to grow with them. So, whatever happened to Calvin and workers like him? Well, technology happened. As he and others watched company after company make their employees and applicants do everything online. And they watched those same companies spend dollar after dollar to invest in making a simplified and easier user experience for the customer, but has done virtually no improvement in the user experience for the applicant who would ultimately go on to take care of that customer. But us Calvins, we're still here. The workforce that you need is still here. We're just waiting for a company to be courageous and smart enough to realize that the path forward is not simply us trying to keep up with you, but it's you trying to meet us and help us after we've helped you do quite so much. So while I am eternally grateful for every phone call and unsolicited email and private message on LinkedIn asking me for 15 minutes of my time to tell me how technology can help me in the hiring process, I am much more interested in having a longer conversation about all the people that it's leaving behind. Thank you.